Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth online lecture. Today, I'll do a similar thing I did last week. So I'll recap what we went through last week about the two class projects of education linguistics, and then we'll get into today's lecture, which is going to be about how we can use a successful project and deconstruct that project to then use it as a model or an example to create a new project. And I'll be looking at Australia's National Tobacco Campaign, which is actually what I'm looking at for my PhD. So, and you'll find this is something that you guys have been doing for the tutorials as well. So for the fake news project that you had to do, so you had to look at something that was successful, and then for tomorrow's tutorial you'll be looking at what you've designed and or what you've created for that. So let's look at the two examples we talked about last week. So how to write a literature review for project development and how to write nursing notes. So essentially I showed you guys how for these two class projects that the students had to do in educational linguistics, they use the same steps that you guys will be using for your own project for this semester. So essentially, in creating the workbook for how to write a literature review for project development and the workbook on how to write receiving admission notes for nurses, the students had to first identify the issue and problem that they wanted to address. In the case of the literature review, it was essentially that there wasn't a lot of stuff out there about how to write a literature review for project development specifically. So there are different types of literature reviews, and there was literature lacking about how to write one specifically for project development. Then, and in regards to the nursing notes, they found that what was happening in actual hospitals wasn't aligned with what they needed to do for what the profession needed them to do. And in terms of a community, so for the literature review, the community was that initially it was the Language Society Empower students of 2018, and then of course once the workbook was designed and it was uploaded, other people could use it as well. And in terms of the nursing notes, the community was nurses and nurses students, but again, because these workbooks are now available online, their target audience has now broadened. So then we stepped through how before they created the actual material, the actual workbook, they had to first review quite a bit of literature, which is something that you will have to do as well for your projects. And it's something that we'll start looking at next week. So we'll show you guys how to do a literature review for your projects. And then of course, once they have identified the problem, they've worked with their community, which again were mostly students, they've reviewed the literature, they then designed the workbook. So both of these workbooks were designed by educational linguistics students. So the literature review was 2018, and the nursing notes was from the cohort of 2017. And it was essentially the whole class working with Amma, who teaches the class. They then developed the workbook, and both are now available online on academia. So what I'll step through today is how we can use a successful project as a model to create a new one. And this is essentially what I'm doing for my PhD, so this is still a work in progress. I'll step you through what I've done already, and there's going to be a few slides towards the end that's not finalized yet, but we can still use them. So essentially what I'm doing for my PhD is I'm not going to talk about the whole thing today because I definitely won't have time for that, but essentially I'm looking at how I can use Australia's National Tobacco Campaign, which is a successful campaign, to use it as a model to create materials, or to see how we can use the analysis to create materials to design a campaign aimed at sugar consumption. So today I will talk about the deconstruction of Australia's national tobacco campaign, and then in the next couple of weeks I'll show you how we can use the results of the analysis to potentially design materials for a campaign aimed at sugar consumption. So first of all, why did I decide to focus on Australia's national tobacco campaign as my model? Well, the reason is because first of all, it's successful, but also it's Australia's most intense and longest running public health campaign. It launched in 1997 and it's been ongoing in Australia since then. And the National Tobacco Campaign has been successful in doing a number of things. So it's helped to reduce smoking rates across Australia. It's helped to reduce the amount of people that are taking up smoking in the first place. And it's also helped to increase the age at which people start smoking. So it went from the age of 14 to now the age of 16. And research from Australia was among one of the first research in the world to show that anti-smoking campaigns can actually reduce smoking. So Australia's National Tobacco Campaign isn't the only thing that's addressing smoking rates. It's part of Australia's broader comprehensive tobacco control. So you would know, or maybe you don't know, but Australia's comprehensive tobacco control, in addition to mass media campaigns, also includes taxation. So taxes on cigarettes and other tobacco products are actually quite high in Australia, and the taxes go up every year. There are also a lot of sale restrictions. So first of all, you can only buy cigarettes if you are 18 and over, and also it's restricted as to where it can and can't be sold. We also have smoke-free laws, so there are certain places where you can and can't smoke. So I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but around campus, I'm aware that some of you haven't actually gotten to the campus yet, but around campus here at UCID, there are areas that are designated for smoking, and then the rest is a no smoking zone. So there are laws as to where you can and can't smoke. And then the Australia National Tobacco Campaign is part of that broader tobacco control in Australia. Now, yes, the NTC has been successful, and the way that I'm defining success here is to look at it from a very broad perspective. So, of course, there are certain groups such as the Indigenous population and people of lower SES where the NTC hasn't worked as well, so where the smoking rates are actually quite high. So for example, in Indigenous men, so there are around 49% of Indigenous men that smoke, which is a lot higher than the general population. So yes, it has its limitations. There are certain groups of people where smoking rates are still quite high, and in some cases where it hasn't budged at all since the introduction of the NTC. But broadly speaking, the campaign has been successful. So its aim was to reduce smoking rates in Australia, and it has done that, just broadly speaking. So the National Tobacco Campaign has various campaigns that have been launched as part of it. So there are federal campaigns, and then there are state-based campaigns. And for my thesis, I'm only going to be looking at the federal campaigns, and they are listed here. So think about the National Tobacco Campaign as this broad overarching aim of reducing tobacco use in Australia. And then as part of the NTC, all these campaigns here have been launched since 1997. So the first campaign ever of the NTC was the Every Cigarette is Doing You Damage campaign. And then we have the health warning. So if you guys smoke, or perhaps if you've seen cigarette boxes around in Australia, you will see that on the cigarette packs there are graphic images warning you of the damage of smoking. So that's part of the health warnings campaign. There's a Quit For You, Quit For Two campaign, which was aimed at pregnant women to help them quit or encourage them to quit smoking while pregnant. The Break the Chain campaign was aimed at Indigenous Australians. Cough campaign essentially talked about how an ordinary cough can turn into a lung cancer cough. The Health Benefits campaign was about telling people how if you quit smoking, all these things start to repair around your body. So your sense of smell start to return, you're decreasing the risk of heart disease, etc. Stop Before the Suffering Starts was a campaign essentially telling smokers that if they continue to smoke, they will get emphysema and suffer and struggle to breathe and potentially die. And we've got the last one, the Don't Make Smoke Your Story campaign. This is an ongoing campaign. This is again aimed mostly at Indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders, and features a man called Ted, and Ted tells us his story of how he's quit for his family. So a way of looking at it is to look at the National Tobacco Campaign as the broad overarching campaign that's been running for 22 years, almost 23 years, and then within the NTC we have various campaigns that I've just talked about, so these ones. And then within the campaigns, we've got the campaign materials. So you have things like TV ads, radio ads, posters, and more recent campaigns like the Don't Make Smoke Your Story campaigns also have apps that you can use to help you quit smoking. And they also have the ads. They still have the app for the Quit For You, Quit For Two campaign. So it's this app you can download on your phone, and it asks you to like put how, if you're pregnant, so how many months along you are, how many weeks, the name of your baby, and it provides you with little tips about how to curb your smoking cravings. It provides you with games to keep your fingers busy so that you don't get tempted to smoke and all that stuff. So that falls under the campaign materials. So as you can see, the National Tobacco Campaign, it's actually quite a huge campaign. And if I was to also include the state-based campaign, so each state and territory also launches their campaigns, it would be huge. So that's one of the reasons why I only am looking at the federal-based campaigns, because otherwise I'd have way too much data, but also because these campaigns here, they are run around the whole of Australia, while the state-based campaigns are used in some states and not in others. So these ones have the most reach. So this is just a way of looking at the National Tobacco Campaign. Just I think that helps me to kind of like categorize all the different types of data that I have, which is quite a lot. Now, okay, so the NTC has been successful. So now how is it that we can just deconstruct the NTC to use it as a model for a campaign aimed at sugar consumption? So I realized that I needed to have a set of analytical tools that I was going to be able to use to look at large-scale change, to look at the macro level, and to look at micro levels. I needed analytical tools that were scalable across those three levels. I needed the analytical tools to analyze both language and other meaning-making resources in various modalities. So not just looking at written and spoken language, but how do I look at the images, so both static images and posters and moving images and TV ads. How do I analyze the sounds? So again, spoken language is part of sounds, but you can also have background music as well. So how do I analyze all that? So I needed something to look at these three levels. So I'm taking the 22 years of the NTC as large-scale change, so tracking it over 22 years. Then you've got the more macro level, which is looking at the campaigns of the National Tobacco Campaign. So this is the macro level. And then I also needed something to be able to look at it at a more micro level, so to analyze the individual materials, so the individual TV ads, the individual radio ads, but also link it back to this and link it back to this. So how do I do this? How do I analyze all this? So I came up with 3 sets of strategies that are essentially scalable. So these are the 3 sets of strategies that I developed working with my supervisors, of course, using them to analyze these. There we go, these 3 levels. So these 3 sets of strategies can be used to look at the NTC over 22 years. It can be used to look at the macro level at the campaigns and the micro levels at the individual materials. So these 3 sets of strategies, I am naming them. So they are a set of contrasting strategies. So negativity, positivity, technicalising, personalising, and then the third one is behaviour. And there are 2 subsets of behavior. So campaigns that look at smoking versus campaigns that look at quitting, campaigns that focus on an actual behavior, on what you are actually doing, and campaigns that focus on a possible behavior, so something that you could be doing. So these 3 sets of strategies here can all be used to look at the NTC across these 3 levels. So these 3 sets of strategies are what I'm calling scalable. They can be scaled up to look at large-scale change. They can be scaled down to look at individual materials. And of course, I'll show this to you guys. So each of these strategies, so they each generalize across a suite of language, image, and sound features. What that means is you can use these strategies to analyze language, to analyze images, and to analyze sounds. They are not tied down to any particular language or other semiotic features. So again, so from one of the lectures from a couple of weeks ago, so semiotic here refers to meaning-making resources. So we said that language was a meaning-making resource, but other things like colors also make meanings, gestures also make meanings, movements also make meanings. So that's what this means here. So these sets of strategies here, they are not tied down to any particular language or other semiotic features. Rather, their actualization in any particular text may be different depending on the situation and other interacting strategies. And I will show you what this means. So essentially, even if we see the same type of language features being used in 2 sets of strategies, you can't look at those language features in isolation. You have to look at it in terms of everything else that's happening in the text. So taking this discourse semantics approach, so looking at the whole text, looking at what's happening in the text as a whole. And each of the strategy is independent of each other. Although, however, like I said before, because they are contrastive sets of strategies, so you will have campaigns that tend to either be more negative or be more positive. You will have materials that tend to be either more negative or more positive, but essentially they are all independent of each other. So like I said, they can be used to scale up to look at large scale change, and they can use to be scaled down to look at micro level texts, such as the TV ads, the radio ads, the posters. So today I'm not going to talk about large scale change, but I'm going to be showing you how these 3 sets of strategies can be used to analyze campaigns. So these campaigns here. So essentially what I'm saying is you can use these strategies to either say to categorize the campaigns as being more negative, more positive, more technicalising, more personalising. They tend to focus more on smoking or more on quitting, more on actual behaviour as opposed to more possible potential behaviour. So that's one way of being able to categorize these campaigns. Are they more one strategy than the other? Alright, now, so Now we get into the actual strategies. So for each of these three sets, I'm going to describe them. I'm going to describe what they mean in broad terms, and then I'm going to show you examples to illustrate that. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to look at how we can use this same set of strategies to actually design things. So today I'm only focusing on how we can use them to analyze the campaigns and the campaign materials of the NTC, and then in next week and the week after, we'll look at how we can use them to design things. Alright, so the first set of strategies are negativity, positivity. So what do they mean? So some campaigns focus more on the negative aspects of smoking, such as the detrimental effects of smoking on the body. That's pretty straightforward, I hope. So some campaigns focus more on the negative aspects of smoking, that's negativity, while other campaigns focus more on the positive aspects of quitting, such as having more time to spend with one's family. So that's positivity. So again, negativity focuses on negative aspects of smoking, and positivity focuses more on the positive aspects of quitting. Now I'm going to show you two campaigns to illustrate what negativity means and to illustrate what positivity means. So the Every Cigarette is Doing You Damage campaign is a more negative style campaign because it focuses on the damage that smoking causes on the body. And again, this was the first campaign launched in the NTC in 1997. So let's have a look at. So this campaign features 6 TV ads. So I'll show you all 6 TV ads, and you can get a sense of what I mean by a negative style campaign. Okay, so there are 6 ads. I've only showed you 2, but essentially it's the same thing. So each ad focuses on a specific aspect of specific damage that smoking causes to the body, and it walks you through it. So that's a more negative style campaign. Now we can contrast this to Quit For You, Quit For Two, which is a more positive style campaign because it focuses on the benefits of quitting when you're pregnant. So that's a more positive style campaign. So I hope you can see the very different from each other. Now I'm going to step through each of the campaigns individually and step through how negativity is realized through language, image, and sound. So how is negativity realized in language? Well, it's realized one way, I can't show you everything because I won't have time, but one way that negativity is realized is through negative evaluation. So if we look at here, this is the example from the brain ads. This is the second ad that that you guys saw. So I'll read you the voiceover. Every cigarette is doing you damage. Smoking creates blood clots, which can cause strokes. Some strokes kill, blind, or paralyze. Others you don't even know you're having. This is the result of a minor stroke in a smoker, aged 38. Every cigarette is doing you damage. So I have highlighted all the negative evaluations here in red. Now, those of you who've done appraisal would know that this is looking at attitudes. But essentially, as you can see, there's lots of things that have been highlighted red. So there's a lot of negative evaluations. So cigarette is negative, damage is negative, smoking is negative, blood clots are negative, strokes are negative, kill, blind, paralyzed, negative, stroke again, cigarette again, damage again. So there's a lot of negative language that's being used here. Now, what about the images? So what's happening in the actual images? So we can look at images in terms of static images that you would see in posters and moving images that you see in TV ads, videos, movies. So this is more moving images. But looking at the image, so negativity is realized in images through the use of color. So the colors here are quite dark, just 2 examples here, 2 shots. So they're dark, they're dull, they're lacking in color. So you don't see bright colors like yellows and pinks and greens. No, it's quite dark, lots of black, lots of dark colors. And these create a very negative feeling. Now, what about the sound? So the main sound that you can hear is the voiceover. So that's the spoken language. So if we listen to the voiceover of the man, he has quite a rough and low voice, which evokes this negative feeling again. And I'll play this again in a sec, but also I want you to pay attention to the wheezing exhale at the end. So there's this wheezing sound that tells us that this person isn't well, that they're sick. So let's have a look. So if you listen to this carefully, at the end when the smoke is going back up through the lung, back up through the throat, sorry, there's kind of like wheezing sound, this wheezing exhale, but also there's lots of things that's going on here, lots of sounds that are negative sounds, but again, don't have time to go through everything, but that's just a couple of examples of how negativity can be seen. Now let's look at positivity. So we looked at the TV ad. So one way that it can be realized for language, when I say realize, what I mean is how it's expressed, so how it's shown. So how is positivity shown in the language? So it's shown through positive evaluations. It's the opposite of negativity. So before it was negative evaluation, now it's positive evaluation. And I've coded those in green. So there is still a bit of negative here in the red, but mostly it's positive. So this is the voiceover. So when you're pregnant, some cravings are okay to give into, but when your craving is for cigarettes, which is negative, that's worth fighting. When you choose to quit smoking, you get the toxins out of your system, and you lower the risk of miscarriage and serious health problems for your baby. So quit for you, quit for 2, phone quit line to talk to people who will give you the support you need, and ask about our free smartphone app full of great tips to help you get through the cravings. So lots of positive evaluations going on here. So there's a bit of negative with the cigarettes, but Okay, so it's worth fighting, quitting smoking is good, getting the toxins out of your system is good, lowering the risk of miscarriage and serious health problems. So you could say that miscarriage and serious health problems are negative evaluations, but so you will learn, so if those of you in the first semester, when you're doing discourse analysis, when you're looking at a text, you need to look at the whole text, so you can't just look at the individual words. So you need to look at what's happening. So it's not miscarriage and serious health problems that is negative, but it's lowering the risk. So therefore, it makes it positive. Quitting is of course positive. Getting support is positive. Great is good, of course, and getting help is good. So yeah, so for language, positivity is realized through use of positive evaluations. Now let's have a look at this campaign, Quit for You, Quit for Two. So in addition to the TV ad that we saw, it also has a range of posters. So I've shown you this before, I think in the first online lecture. So let's have a look at how positivity is realized in these two posters here. So again, so while before we saw dark, dull images, colors, here the colors are light. So lots of whites, lots of pinks. They're quite warm, so pinks and reds. And these all create this gentle, positive, optimistic feeling. So the use of light, warm colors here realize positivity. And this is the same thing as well if we were to look at the TV ad again. Same use of the same similar colors, these pale colors, light colors. Now, let's listen to the TV ad again and pay attention to some of the sounds that's going on. So if we look at the voice, so first of all, the voice is a woman's voice, and the voice is quite smooth, it's quite high, and it kind of creates this positive feeling, and you can almost hear a smile in her voice as well. And then you've got this slight guitar playing in the background, which again creates this very happy, positive atmosphere, which is very different to the sounds that we heard in the Every Cigarette is Doing You Damage campaign. So let's have a listen, to this again. So yeah, as you can see, her voice is quite smooth, and you can hear a smile in her voice. The guitar in the background is light, creates a positive atmosphere. Okay, so that was the first set of strategies: negativity, positivity. The second set is called technicalising and personalising. So I'll look at technicalising first. So some campaigns focus more on the technical aspects of smoking or quitting. They focus on either how smoking damages the body or how smoking repairs the body. So in relation to smoking, technicalising campaigns tend to be dehumanizing. They kind of look at smoking and quitting in a very general sense, as opposed to personalizing smoking, which is looking at it more from an individual perspective. Technicalizing campaigns tend to show smoking or quitting out of context, and they tend to focus on body parts, limbs, organs, as opposed to people. So technicalizing campaign, so they're more technical, and I'll show you what I mean by more technical. They focus more on body parts as opposed to focusing on the person, and they're quite dehumanizing, so we don't really focus on the whole person, but they focus on parts of the person, which is quite different to personalizing campaigns, which tend to be more humanizing, and they look at how smoking or quitting affects the whole person as opposed to individual body parts. And they tend to focus on individuals, so one person, as opposed to focusing on the general population. And they tend to show these individuals in various social contexts. So really looking at like the people aspect of smoking, of quitting, as opposed to looking at different body parts of smoking or quitting. Again, I'll show you two examples of two different campaigns to illustrate technicalising and personalising, and then I'll go through each of them individually to show you how it's realised through language, image, and sound features. So the health warning campaign is a more technicalising style campaign because it focuses on the technical aspects of smoking on the body. While Don't Make Smoke Your Story is a more personalising in style because it focuses on the person, and that specific person is Ted. So it follows Ted through his quit journey, and it talks about how quitting has benefited him and his family. So looking at people as opposed to looking at body parts. So it's the difference between this on the left and this on the right. So this is more technicalising and this is more personalising. And you will see as we go through this, you might say, oh, well, this also looks negative and this also looks positive. Yes, you're right, because these strategies actually do combine in specific combinations. I'm not going to get through this today, but they do combine together. So this is not only technicalising, but it's also negative. This is not only personalising, but it's also positive. And these two sets of strategies tend to actually combine together. So technicalising campaigns tend to also be more, tend to combine with negative, and personalising campaigns tend to also be positive. So they do combine together. Alright, so let's look at technicalising first. So these are the health warnings campaign. So this is the campaign that has all these graphic images on cigarette boxes. So this is still ongoing. You may have seen these around, these cigarette boxes, if you smoke, or even if you don't, you might have seen them on the ground. If not, you can just Google health warnings campaign in Australia, and it will show you all the list of all the different graphic images. Okay, so how is technicalising realised in the language? So on the cigarette boxes, you will have the image here, and then at the back of the pack, you will also have a health warning message. So I'm looking at the message here. So I'm looking at the language of the heading and the language of the health warning message. So this is what it says on there. So the heading is smoking causes peripheral vascular disease. And then this is what the text on here is. Smoking narrows and blocks blood vessels, reducing blood and oxygen supply to extremities, your feet, legs, hands and arms. Over time, this can result in pain, open sores that don't heal, and gangrene. Gangrene leads to amputation. So technicalising here is realised through use of technicalised language. So the medical field is being recontextualized to an everyday field. So what do I mean by field? So again, if you've done register and genre, you will know what field means. So you will know what register means. And those of you who are currently doing functional grammar, you might have come across the word. But essentially, there's different types of field. You can, there's more technicalized fields, such as the medical field, in engineering field, physics field, chemistry field, linguistic field, and then you can think about a more everyday field, so an everyday sense of things. And so what's happening here, they are so recontextualizing means you take a particular set of linguistic features from one field and you put it into a new context, and in this case the medical language is being put into the everyday language. So this is just to put it very simply. But even though this medical language is being put into an everyday language, it's still technical. So what do I mean by technicalized language here? So peripheral vascular disease, that's a very technicalized language. So this is a disease. It's a disease that occurs when your blood vessels start to narrow and it blocks the oxygen supply, which eventually leads to things like gangrene. so your limbs start to essentially rot. There is more technicalized language here, so narrows and blocks your blood vessels, it reduces your blood and oxygen supplies, it can result in pain, in open sores, and in gangrene, and gangrene leads to amputations. It's a very technicalized language that's being used here. And this is something that you see across this campaign, Health Warnings campaign. In all of those packs, there's a lot of technicalized language that's being used, and that's one way that technicalizing is realized. Now, another way that technicalizing is realized is if we look at what's happening. So if we look at this here, the health warning message, we can divide the language into doers and done to. So doers cause things to happen, and they cause things to happen to be done to. So smoking causes peripheral vascular disease. So smoking is a doer, and it's causing this. Smoking also causes blood vessels to narrow and get blocked, and it also causes smoking also causes pain, open sores, and gangrene leads to amputation. So essentially what this is illustrating is it's all about body parts, because remember what I said, where are we? So technicalizing campaigns focus on looking at body parts, right? Focuses on body parts, limbs, organs, and which is exactly what's happening here. It's all about body parts, feet, legs, arms, hands, amputations. It's all about technical language, gangrene, amputations. So that's one way of looking at what's happening. So this is something that you will learn. It's called a nuclear relations analysis. I think all of you would have done transitivity analysis. It's similar to transitivity analysis. Now, what about the image? So there's a lot of images on the pack. So how is technicalizing realized in the image? Well, it's realized in a very similar way to the language. So instead of spelling out the words, they actually show you the images of those body parts, of those organs, of those limbs, clearly illustrated here. So here, this is a lung, this is a diseased lung, this is a diseased foot, this is a diseased gum and teeth. So same thing, technicalizing campaigns focus on damaged body parts, organs, and limbs. You can see that in the image and in the language. So now for this one, there is no sounds because this is not a video or a TV ad, so we'll leave the sounds for this one, and we'll look at the personalizing campaign, which is Dominic Smokes Your Story. Now let's look at so I showed you the poster for Dominic Smokes Your Story. Now let's look at the TV ad. So this is a more personalizing style campaign. So let's step through it. So if we look at the language of the TV ad here, so I've put the transcript here. So one aspect of personalizing is the use of personal pronouns, especially I, and the use of first names. So like we said, go back to this. So personalizing campaigns tend to humanize smoking or quitting, and they tend to focus on individuals instead of the general population, and it shows individuals in various social contexts. So as we saw in the TV ad here, so Ted is in a lot of social contexts, different social contexts. So he's with his kids, he's with his families, and it's focusing on an individual. It's focusing on Ted. If we look at the language here, the language tells us that he And it's personalizing as well. So it's realized the use of personal pronouns I's and the use of first names. So family is everything to me. I can't imagine life without them, to be honest. I've had my battles with smokes. My lungs got pretty bad. Sometimes I could hardly breathe, and that was tough on everyone. I'm not sure why I smoked. I just did. My kids, Joe and Yanni, I wanted to be there for them, so I quit. Quitting was tough. I just kept trying. Now I can keep up with them in the yard, and I've got more money to spend on better things. Mum and the audience are pretty happy that I quit. They didn't want me to die from smokes like Dad did. My name is Ted, and the family is my story. Blah, blah, blah. So as you can see, it's very personalizing language. Lots of personal pronouns I, and lots of first names. So it's focusing on individuals here, not the general population. So what about image? So how is personalizing realized in the images? So if we look at the TV ad and those two posters here, it's focusing on like people as a whole. So we see Ted with his family. So Ted is in a lot of different social contexts. So here he's playing guitar with his family, here he's writing about his kids. So focusing on the individuals, showing individuals in various social contexts. And also one element here in the image is the eye gaze. So Ted, he's always looking at his family, looking at his son here, looking at his son here. And it shows you that this is an individual, and in this case quitting has really had this positive impact on him and his family. And again, as you can see, you could also analyze this campaign as positive, in addition to being personalizing. Now what about the sounds? Well, in the TV ad that we just saw, the voiceover is Ted, and it's not someone else. So that's very personalizing. So it's not using a different voiceover. It's using the same person that the ad is about. So again, it's personalizing Ted. It's focusing on the individual. Now the third set of strategies. So this is going to take. So I'm still currently working on this. So I will only be showing you how these strategies are realized in the language. I haven't looked at the image and sounds yet, so we'll only look at the language here. But the third strategy is essentially focusing on behavior. And there are two sets of behaviors that the campaigns focus on. So campaigns either center on smoking or quitting, and they can either center more on an actual behavior or on a possible behavior. So essentially you get these four different combinations. You get smoking as an actual behavior, smoking as a possible behavior, quitting as an actual behavior, quitting as a possible behavior. So yeah, I'm only going to be showing you how it's realized in the language because I haven't had time to really do a lot of analysis on the image and the sounds. So let's have a look at what these four different combinations look like and how it's realized in the language. So a campaign that focuses on smoking as an actual behavior is the Every Cigarette is Doing You Damage campaign, which we saw as a negative star campaign. So the campaign's main message focuses on how every cigarette you smoke causes immediate and sometimes irreversible damage to various areas of the body, as opposed to focusing on a possible damage. So this damage is happening when you smoke, every time you smoke. It's not something that could happen, that might happen. It does happen. So this campaign very much focuses on smoking, and it focuses on smoking as an actual behavior. Let's have a look at it again. Okay, so it's very obvious that this campaign is focusing on smoking as opposed to quitting. So I'm not going to go through how this is shown in the language. So I'll focus instead on how actual behavior is being realized. So if we look at the voiceover again, so every cigarette is doing you damage. Smoking creates blood clots which can cause strokes. Some strokes kill, blind or paralyze. Others you don't even know you're having. This is the result of a minor stroke in a smoker, age 38. Every cigarette is doing you damage. So how is actual behavior realized in the language? Well, the language is what we call realis. So language that is realis focuses on what has happened or on what is happening, as opposed to language which is irrealis, which focuses on what might be. So all of the TV ads here in this campaign, all 6 of them, have realis language for the most part. So it's focusing on what has been and what is. So smoking is doing you damage. It creates blood clots. It kills, it blinds, it paralyzes. Sometimes you don't even know you're having it. This here is a result of a minor stroke. Every cigarette is doing you damage. It's realis. It's what is happening. And in the pink and the red here, this is talking about what is possible, but overall it's focusing on what is and what has happened. Now, what about smoking as a possible behavior? And an example of a campaign is health warnings. So it features gruesome graphic images of how smoking damages various parts of the body. And through the language, it warns smokers that if they smoke, that will happen to them. So essentially what is happening in the health warnings campaign, so again, it's very obvious this is about smoking, not quitting. So the language tells you what might happen, and then they show you an image. So this is what might happen to you. So this is obviously an image of a smoker that has had gum and teeth cancer or periodontitis, but essentially it's warning you about what might happen to you if you continue to smoke. And the language is what we call irrealis. So it's language that is focusing on what might be, on things that haven't happened yet, on what could be. So let's have a look at the at this here, at the health message. Smoking causes inflammation of the gum and other tissues around your teeth, called periodontitis. Symptoms can include gum redness, swelling, bleeding, infection, and pain. The gum, bones, and other tissues supporting your teeth can be destroyed, resulting in tooth loss. So, as you can see in the red here, it's talking about what could potentially happen. So symptoms of periodontitis can include this, and then this can lead to the destruction of your teeth. There's also evidence of realis here, so it causes this. But overall, if we look, so there are 12 different graphic health warning messages, and if we look at it over the 12 packs, there's this clear pattern of irrealis. So here I've only showed you one example, but if we look at the whole corpus of the 12 health warning message and their corresponding graphic images, we see that the language is mostly irrealis, so focusing on what might be, what could happen, as opposed to what has happened or what is happening. Now, what about campaigns that focus on quitting as an actual behavior? So one example is quickly quit for 2. Let's look at Ted again. So again, the campaign looks at Ted, who is an ex-smoker and an Indigenous man, and the campaign follows Ted through his quit journey. So again, this campaign is obviously talking about quitting, so I'm not going to go through how the language shows quitting. So I'll show you how the language is focusing on actual. And same thing, so actual behavior, the language is realis. It's focusing on what has been and on what is. So you guys already saw the TV ad, so I won't play it again, but I'll show you the transcript and how the language is realis, so focusing on what has been and what is. So family is everything to me. I can't imagine life without them, to be honest. I've had my battles with smokes. My lungs got pretty bad. Sometimes I could hardly breathe, and that was tough on everyone. I'm not sure why I smoked. I just did. My kids dry and yarny. I wanted to be there for them, so I quit. Quitting was tough, and I just kept trying. Now I can keep up with them in the yard, and I've got more money to spend on better things. Mum and the aunties are pretty happy that I quit. They didn't want me to die from smoke, so Dad did. My name is Ted, and family is my story. So as you can see, lots of things, lots of realist language. So it's all about what is happening or what has happened. So quitting as an actual behavior. What about an example of a campaign looking at quitting as a possible behavior? So we'll look at the health benefits campaign. So this campaign had a series of posters like this, and it also had a series of radio ads. The posters and the radio ads were also translated in various languages to target specific communities. So, such as Chinese, Cantonese, Vietnamese, Arabic. So I've got the English version here. So this campaign presents smokers with a possible better future where they don't smoke. So in that future, their body starts to repair itself from the damage that smoking has caused. So again, I'm not going to go through how the language shows that it's quitting. Pretty obvious. Let's look at how it's showing quitting as a possible behavior. So before when we looked at the health warnings, we saw that one language feature was irrealis, so looking at what might happen. But another language feature of looking at something that is possible is looking at the circumstances of time. So I think you should all, even those of you who are in your first semester, you would have learned about circumstances, I think, or are going to learn about what circumstances are in functional grammar. But so circumstances of time include things like adverbs. So adverbs of time, so in a week, in 3 months, in 12 hours, in a year, in 1 month, in 5 days, in 12 months. So these are all talking about things in the future. These haven't happened yet, so this is possible. So in 1 week, this can happen. In 3 months, this can happen. In 12 hours, this can happen. So circumstances of time here also focus on what is possible. You have different types of circumstances, circumstances of time, circumstances of place, etc. Again, so they are realized through adverbs and phrases, which is something that you will learn. So that's another language feature of looking at what's possible, circumstances of time. In those time frames, these things might happen. So now that I've showed you these 3 strategies, in the next couple of weeks, what I'll do, so next week, so in 2 weeks time, I'm going to show you how these strategies can be used for design. So today we've only looked at deconstruction or analysis. In 2 weeks time, we're going to look at creating, at designing, at construction. And before we get to that, we need to do a literature review. So next week, I'm going to show you what a literature review might look like if I want to design a campaign aimed at sugar consumption. And I'm going to follow these. So again, I'm going to keep showing you these steps here just to show you guys that when you're creating projects, regardless of what the project is, these tend to be the 4 steps that people take. So I have identified my problems. For my thesis, I haven't really worked with the community, but then I'm going to show you how you review a literature and what kind of literature that you do review before you start to design your projects. And again, this is something that you will be doing too as well. So I'm going to add the reference list here before I post this online. So just to give you guys, if you need, if you want to do some further readings, And otherwise, I will see some of you tomorrow for the tutorials. Otherwise, yeah, I will be posting another lecture next week. So have a good rest of the week.